Not every gemstone was meant to shine. Some were carved in silence. Some were never meant to be touched at all. Throughout history, there have been stones that emperors wore with pride until whispers began to circulate, until temples sealed them in walls, until entire cultures refused to speak their names aloud. These weren't gems banned for war or wealth. They were banned because they listened too closely, glowed at the wrong hour, or opened something that never fully closed again. Some of them lie under museum glass, others remain in vaults, unlabeled, and a few are still missing. Yet among all 10, one stands apart, a deep green shimmer, veined like wings mid-flight, a gem that no angel claimed, but every monastery feared. And though it rarely appears in public auctions, when it does, its value is not measured by carats, but by the price someone is willing to pay to keep it hidden. The last time it surfaced, it was quietly sold for $14,500 without documentation to a collector who later declined all interviews. No photo was released, no location disclosed, only a message. The pattern is too perfect. It doesn't look like wings anymore. It looks like something that knew it was being watched. This is not a list of beautiful stones. It's a record of the ones that crossed a line between ritual and relic, between memory and myth. These are 10 gemstones that were banned, sealed, or silenced for being touched by darkness. And if there's a place to begin this descent, it's not with rubies nor emeralds, but with a blade, forged not by human hands but by volcanic fire. A stone that's neither metal nor crystal, yet cut deeper than either. Because it was never designed to shine, it was made to take. From the temples of Teotihuacan to the sealed drawers of modern museums, its edge has stayed the same. This is not mythology. This is obsidian. Rank 10th. Obsidian from Teotihuacan. The Blade of Sacrifice. Just 40 kilometers northeast of Mexico City lies a place once known as the City of the Gods. Today we refer to it as Teotihuacan, an ancient urban center that once stood at the heart of Mesoamerican civilization more than 2,000 years ago. Beneath its volcanic earth and crumbling pyramids, archaeologists have unearthed thousands of fragments of a material darker than midnight, sharper than steel, and gleaming like polished glass. This is obsidian, natural volcanic glass, formed when molten lava cools so rapidly that no crystals can form. But in the hands of ancient Teotihuacanos, obsidian was far more than a tool. It became a symbol, a threshold, a line between the human world and something beyond it. Obsidian is found in abundance in Sierra de las Navajas, a volcanic mountain range in central Mexico. This region supplied the raw material for countless obsidian artifacts, ritual blades, spearheads, ceremonial masks, crafted by artisans who mastered the art of pressure flaking. Color-wise, black obsidian was the most common and the most culturally significant. Other varieties, such as rainbow obsidian, silver sheen, or gold sheen, were considered too beautiful for specific rituals and were often reserved for decorative or spiritual purposes. In its raw form, obsidian often appears in rounded or irregular nodules, with naturally glossy surfaces and razor-sharp edges when broken. Although it ranks only 5 to 5.5 on the Mohs scale of hardness, its edge can be honed so finely that it is still used today in precision surgical tools. In modern times, obsidian remains valued for its mysterious beauty. It's especially popular in Mexico, the United States, and parts of Europe for use in jewelry, such as rings, pendants, and hand-carved amulets. A handcrafted obsidian pendant can range from $15 to $80, while more intricate pieces adorned with gold or symbolic engravings may reach several $100s. Still, obsidian holds a reputation that extends beyond its aesthetic appeal. Some pieces, especially those tied to ceremonial sites, are now subject to cultural restrictions. Certain artifacts are kept sealed within museum archives, not only for preservation, but also for cultural and historical sensitivity. During a dig beneath the Pyramid of the Moon, archaeologists discovered over 1,500 obsidian fragments arranged in the shape of a six-pointed star, an unprecedented pattern in Mesoamerican archaeology. Alongside these fragments were ritual objects that necessitated the site's temporary closure for extended research. Notably, when some of the obsidian pieces were brought into a controlled lab environment, sensors reportedly malfunctioned. One museum team recorded a brief localized power failure that occurred precisely when the specimen was being placed under spectrographic analysis. Due to these and other incidents, the Mexican government placed certain ceremonial obsidian artifacts under cultural protection. Some are no longer permitted for international trade, even if they've been deactivated, cleansed, or stripped of symbolic context. Both UNESCO and the National Institute of Anthropology agree. These are not simply archaeological remains. They are physical remnants of a worldview where reality, belief, and the unseen were inseparable. Obsidian, on the surface, just volcanic glass. But in Teotihuacan, it marked the boundary between light and shadow, offering passage into realms we still struggle to name. And this was only the beginning. Because the next stone, fiery red and once believed to hold the secret of eternal vitality, left behind a legacy no one dares forget. A blade can cut, but not all stones are sharp. Some promise power, offer beauty, even a whisper of immortality, until the line between offering and warning is no longer discernible. The next stone wasn't wielded, it was consumed, mixed into elixirs, brushed onto royal tombs, inhaled in rituals long since erased, and in every civilization that touched it, something began to fade, slowly, without alarm. Because this stone did not strike like obsidian, it lingered. This is Cinnabar, the crimson pact that entire empires once signed, without knowing the cost. Rank 9. Cinnabar, the crimson pact that poisoned empires. It glows like blood under sunlight, smooth as powdered pigment, heavy as metallic ore. To ancient empires, cinnabar was more than a mineral. It was a pact with permanence, a vivid red substance once believed to hold the secret to vitality, power, and transcendence. But what emperors saw as eternal came with consequences they were never prepared to face. Cinnabar, scientifically known as mercury sulfide, HGS, is the primary ore for extracting elemental mercury. The most famous ancient sources include Almaden in Spain, Quaichao, Guizhou in China, and mineral-rich belts across Central Asia. Cinnabar appears in crystalline or massive form, most often in a deep crimson color, sometimes with purplish or brownish undertones. When ground into powder, it produces an intensely vibrant red pigment known as vermilion or zhu sha in Chinese, once used in sacred paints, imperial scripts, and ceremonial lacquers. Extracting cinnabar was never a simple task. Ancient miners ventured deep into poorly ventilated tunnels, carving the ore from stone with rudimentary tools. It was then heated in enclosed furnaces to release mercury vapor, which condensed into liquid metal. Over time, observers began to note strange effects. Workers became fatigued, artisans complained of dizziness, and certain cinnabar-covered sculptures were said to emit a scent so sharp that temple guards refused to stand near them for extended periods. In Han Dynasty China, cinnabar was treasured as the mineral of immortality. Taoist alchemists believed that if properly refined, it could support spiritual transformation. Beyond its medicinal uses, cinnabar was considered spiritually potent, used to ward off negative energy, seal sacred scrolls, and line tombs with protective symbols. But its elevated status also meant it was over-extracted, overused, and eventually treated with extreme caution. In Almaden, Europe's largest cinnabar deposit, 16th century records describe repeated shutdowns, not due to resource depletion, but because of unexplained disturbances following periods of intensive mining. Local authorities at the time began to suspect that cinnabar held unstable properties, not just physically, but metaphysically. At one point, regional laws required religious or scholarly supervision during its use, and private ownership was restricted across several Spanish provinces. Today, cinnabar has been almost entirely phased out of public use. In Japan and China, regulations now prohibit the use of cinnabar in cosmetics, herbal remedies, and food products. Jewelry made from cinnabar, beads, pendants, and carved figurines, still appears in the market, but most are intended for display rather than direct wear. Prices range from $50 to several hundred USD, depending on craftsmanship and origin. Still, it's mainly acquired by collectors and is often stored in sealed containers, away from light and air. Cinnabar hasn't been forgotten. However, it has been sealed, withheld, and restricted. Not because it was weak, but because at one point it was considered too powerful to be controlled. A stone once seen as a gateway to the eternal now serves as a silent reminder of lessons hard-learned across centuries. Obsidian cuts like a blade. Cinnabar glowed like a royal vow. But the next stone, green, coiled like a serpent in the forest, once caused an entire sect to vanish into silence. For hundreds of years, Cinnabar seduced thrones. But the next stone never sat in a palace. It was buried in forest shrines, carved into forgotten walls and worn by those who walked outside the reach of kings. Not because they rebelled, but because they listened to something older than empire. This stone didn't glow, it watched. And in every culture that tried to silence it, one image kept returning. Not a crown, but a coil. This is Serpentine, the stone that spoke to serpent gods. Rank 8, Serpentine, the forbidden gem from the snake temples. Some stones were mined for their beauty. Others were left untouched, for one reason. Too many people claimed to hear whispers when they held them. Serpentine, soft, smooth, and glowing in deep green, was once believed to be the tongue of serpent gods. And for centuries it was not traded openly. Not because it was rare, but because it was silenced deliberately. Serpentine refers to a group of magnesium-rich silicate minerals, formed where oceanic crust meets Earth's mantle, under high pressure and low temperature. It typically appears as a semi-precious stone in shades of olive green, dark forest green, or yellowish green, often veined with white or black. Its low hardness, mos til tre til fem, ease of carving, and soft, waxy luster made it ideal for ritual carvings, ceremonial masks, and seal stones from ancient Babylon in Greece to pre-Xin China. However, in regions like Albania, the Balkans, and Asia Minor during the early Byzantine period, serpentine became associated with serpent cults, spiritual systems that ran parallel to early Christianity, but were eventually labeled heretical. Ancient traditions believed that serpents could connect to the underworld, where entities shaped like serpents, known as Naga, Ophion, or serpent deities, were thought to dwell. Entire shrines were constructed using serpentine stone, especially in the ancient region of Epirus, many of which were later dismantled or built over by Orthodox churches. Documents from the 6th century CE record formal bans on the use of serpentine in public rituals and architecture across parts of the Eastern Mediterranean. Some serpentine relics discovered in Albania and Turkey bear unusual symbols, patterns resembling undeciphered scripts, often intentionally buried or removed from sacred sites. Modern archaeologists suggest that serpentine may have once served as a symbolic conduit, a material believed to hold spiritual power that was incompatible with the dominant belief systems of the time. In terms of trade, serpentine was once polished into jewelry across Russia, India, and China. Today, varieties such as noble serpentine, Russian jade, or new jade can be found on the market, priced from $20 to $150 depending on craftsmanship and clarity. However, serpentine artifacts linked to ritual sites, especially those rich in chromium, which gives them a deep emerald hue, are rarely offered in open markets. Some auction houses even refuse to list them, citing internal policy against objects not meant to be possessed. In the northern mountains of Greece, local folklore claims that placing a serpentine stone under your pillow during a new moon may result in whispers from something not entirely of this world. At the Apollonia archaeological site, a serpentine slab bearing a carved serpent symbol led to a 4-month excavation freeze, not due to technical reasons, but rather to a series of unexplained disturbances in the surrounding area. Serpentine wasn't restricted because of its appearance. It was restricted because of what people believed it could open. A stone that appeared harmless, yet once acted as a silent bridge between humans and something far older. Cinnabar burned like a ritual left unfinished. Serpentine whispered like a language no one had ever truly decoded. But the next stone, black as void, smooth as ash, was once tucked into the clothing of mourners at every funeral, until entire nations moved to restrict it altogether. Serpentine slithered through belief systems that the world tried to erase. However, not every stone is tied to a god or guardian. Some are bound to something far simpler and far heavier. Grief, the kind that clings, that never entirely leaves a house, or a hand, or a name whispered too many times. The next stone didn't threaten. It listened, passed from widow to widow, buried in velvet, sealed not with fear, but with silence. This is Jet, the mourning relic that whispered to the living. Rank 7. Jet, the mourning relic that whispered to the living. It's not a gemstone in the traditional sense. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't shine like crystal. But for thousands of years, Jet has held a power that very few stones ever claimed, the power to hold grief, and sometimes to whisper it back. Born not from fire but from ancient trees buried deep underground, Jet is a stone of sorrow and memory. Geologically, Jet is a form of fossilized wood, usually from prehistoric conifers. Over millions of years, immense pressure transformed that organic matter into a deep black material. Not quite coal, not quite stone. Smooth, lightweight, and soft to the touch, Jet has a distinctive velvety matte sheen when unpolished, and a gentle mirror-like glow when polished. Its hardness ranks low, around 2.5 to 4 on the Mohs scale, but its presence carries something more challenging to measure. Jet has been found in Neolithic tombs in northern Spain, Bronze Age sites in Britain, and across prehistoric Europe, most often near remains, tokens, and ritual objects. The implication: Jet wasn't just an ornament, it was a witness. The ancient Romans believed Jet could ward off malevolent forces. Amulets carved from Jet were placed near doors, hung around necks, or buried with the departed to ensure safe passage between worlds. Pliny the Elder once described it as a material that repels serpents and reveals falsehood. But there's another line, rarely quoted, where he warns, "Jet is not inert, it answers." No one knows quite what he meant. But in folklore from Yorkshire to Sicily, stories emerged of jet pieces that retained emotion, especially sorrow, and sometimes seemed to echo it back to those who wore them. During the Middle Ages, jet became deeply embedded in religious practice. Monks carved prayer beads, crosses, and reliquaries from it, believing it to be a spiritual insulator, capable of separating the sacred from the profane. But not all authorities agreed. In several Eastern Orthodox communities, jet was quietly discouraged. Some abbeys banned the use of beads in cloisters, citing spiritual disturbances in those who held them for too long. These were never official decrees, only whispered rules, passed from senior clergy to apprentices. But no era embraced jet more fully than Victorian England. After the loss of Prince Albert, Queen Victoria wore jet exclusively for decades. It became the stone of mourning, signaling loss, dignity, and solemnity. Workshops in Whitby flourished, carving jet into brooches, lockets, cameos, and rosaries. Wearing jet became not just a fashion statement, it was a ritual, a language of grief. Yet even during its peak popularity, many pieces were sealed in drawers, buried with their owners, or quietly passed down with warnings. Don't wear this unless you must. Today, antique jet jewelry remains sought after by collectors. A hand-carved Victorian pendant may cost anywhere from $80 to $1,000, depending on the level of craftsmanship. But some say the stone still holds echoes. Stories persist of jet jewelry that warms without explanation, chains that shift slightly on the table, or feelings of unexpected heaviness when worn in silence. In modern metaphysical circles, jet is known as a stone of deep absorption, said to draw out emotional residue, especially from places or people holding long histories. In northern England, one tradition remains. Never wear jet that belonged to someone who mourned deeply, not because of superstition, but because some believe the grief never left. The idea isn't fear, it's reverence. The jet isn't just a relic, it's a listener. Jet may be the softest of dark stones, but it carries the most weight, emotionally, historically, symbolically. But the next stone on this list carries no emotion at all. It gleams cold, metallic, and in ancient alchemy, it was said to open portals not just to wealth, but to something far more unpredictable. Jet carried sorrow like a shadow that refused to lift, but the next stone carried something colder. Not grief. Thought. Echoed, repeated, rewired. It didn't weep. It whispered formulas into the ears of those who thought they were alone, a mineral that shone like silver. But once it entered the room, reason began to twist. Not because it was loud, but because it never stopped speaking. This is Stibnite, the alchemist blade that poisoned the mind. Rank 6, Stibnite, the alchemist blade that poisoned the mind. It shines like liquid silver, slender, metallic, dagger-like, yet formed by nature, not by man. For centuries, Stibnite was revered as a gateway to transformation, physical, mystical, and mental. But what began as a stone of possibility slowly became a substance scholars feared to touch. Stibnite is a mineral composed of antimony sulfide, Sb2S3, known for its striking, sword-like crystals. It forms in low-temperature hydrothermal veins and is often found in long, prismatic clusters, gleaming gunmetal gray or silver blue, with a mirror-like luster. Some specimens grow as straight as blades, others twist into geometric patterns so sharp they appear artificial. With a Mohs hardness of just 2, Stibnite is exceptionally soft and brittle, but its appearance commands attention. Too beautiful to ignore, too unstable to trust. Ancient civilizations used Stibnite as a cosmetic and ceremonial pigment. In Egypt, finely ground Stibnite was used as kohl, applied to the eyes not just for beauty, but to ward off evil spirits. But it was in medieval Europe, during the rise of alchemy, that Stibnite took on a far more mysterious role. Alchemists believed it held the key to purifying base elements and unlocking hidden properties of the mind. When heated, Stibnite released fumes believed to open mental gates, altering perception, memory, even dream states. In 14th century manuscripts from Prague and Venice, Stibnite is listed among stones not to be handled lightly. One alchemist wrote, "It sharpens thought at first, but if you keep it near too long, it replaces your voice with its own." What that meant has never been fully explained, but there are consistent records from that era, of scholars who became obsessed with a single formula, of scribes who copied the same passage over and over, of experiments halted not by failure, but by something unspoken. In modern terms, Stibnite contains antimony, a metalloid that, in sufficient quantities, is known to affect the nervous system. Although the mineral itself is relatively stable in its solid form, exposure to dust or fumes during refining can cause confusion, imbalance, and psychological fatigue. By the 1700s, several European states restricted access to raw Stibnite used in non-industrial contexts, particularly within monastic orders and esoteric societies. Today, Stibnite is prized by collectors for its visual allure. Perfect crystal clusters can fetch between $200 and $1,000, depending on size and clarity. But many mineral shows now place warning signs near the specimens, not because of physical contact, but because of what they represent, a material historically linked to altered consciousness. Some museums display Stibnite only under glass, in low-light exhibits, accompanied by text that reads, "Do not breathe on the mirror. Do not speak to your reflection." In some corners of Eastern Europe, rural traditions still regard Stibnite as a listening stone, believed to echo thoughts back if left too close to the bed during sleep. In northern China, it was once buried in the foundation of certain temples, not to invite wisdom, but to trap restless thoughts before they reach the sky. Stibnite, the alchemist's mirror, a blade that reflects more than light, a mineral once believed to expand the mind, then quietly removed from the hands of those who explored too far. And yet the next gemstone on this list was never shaped by human hands at all. It fell from the sky, burning green, and brought with it questions no empire could answer. Stibnite twisted the mind from within. But the next stone never belonged inside the human world to begin with. It came from above. Not as light, but as impact. And when it struck, it left behind something no crown, no church, and no scientist ever fully claimed. Not a relic, a rupture. Buried for 15 million years beneath forest soil, until hands found it, eyes named it, and stories began again. Rank 5. Moldavite, the gem that crashed through sacred ground. It was never meant to be here. Moldavite did not form in the Earth's crust, or beneath ancient volcanoes. It was born in the sky and forged in heat beyond imagination, and hurled toward the Earth with such force that it rearranged everything it touched. For centuries, it lay buried under forest soil in Central Europe, until farmers, monks, and mystics began digging up pieces of green glass that should not exist. Moldavite is a natural tektite, a type of glass formed when a meteorite strikes the Earth, generating enough heat and pressure to liquefy rock, which then cools midair and falls back to the surface. This particular event occurred approximately 15 million years ago in what is now the Czech Republic. The meteorite struck near the present-day town of Nördlingen, Germany, creating the Reese crater and blasting molten rock across hundreds of kilometers. As this rock cooled, it formed Moldavite, a translucent green stone etched with grooves and ridges, as if carved by wind and flame. Geologically, Moldavite has a silica-rich composition and distinctive bottle green to olive coloration, sometimes with a slight brownish tint. Most pieces range from a few grams to several dozen grams in weight. Large, flawless specimens are scarce. Their surface is usually marked by natural pitting and sculpting, creating a texture unlike any other gemstone on Earth. But what made Moldavite truly different was how people reacted to it. The Celts once regarded Moldavite as a gift from the gods, or, as some versions say, a warning. In Slavic folklore, it was known as the Stone of Starfire, said to have fallen during a war between unseen forces. Early Christian monks in Bohemia documented unease around Moldavite. Some refused to wear it. Others recorded dreams of voices, disembodied, unintelligible, after spending time near specific Moldavite shards. One passage from a 12th century monastery reads, "It is not light. It is a memory of something burned before time." In the 20th century, Moldavite drew attention from spiritualist movements across Europe and North America. It was said to accelerate inner change, awaken intuition, and bring clarity, but also trigger emotional upheaval. Healers began calling it the transformation stone. Yet stories circulated of individuals who experienced vivid dreams, sudden visions, and overwhelming sensations shortly after wearing it. Eventually, some metaphysical shops quietly pulled Moldavite from shelves, not because it was dangerous, but because it was too intense for casual use. In terms of trade, Moldavite is one of the most valuable tektites known. Prices range from $15 to $40 per gram, with high-quality specimens exceeding $500 per gram. However, true museum-grade Moldavite, large, translucent, and uncut, has become increasingly difficult to find. The Czech government has restricted access to several dig sites, while illegal mining and smuggling have increased due to global demand. In certain villages of South Bohemia, Moldavite is still buried instead of sold. Local legends say the stone can reopen paths that were closed for a reason. In old Moravian cemeteries, Moldavite fragments have been discovered beneath cornerstones and at the base of wooden crosses, always facing skyward, never down. Some researchers believe these placements weren't decorative, but protective, to keep something in or to keep something out. Moldavite isn't just rare, it's of alien origin, yet deeply ingrained in human belief. A gem that didn't come from the earth, but found its way into our myths, our temples, and our cautionary tales. And the next stone on this list? It never burned, it never cut, but it glowed so purely that it was forbidden to be seen in darkness at all. Moldavite tore through the sky like a warning we still haven't deciphered, but the next stone made no sound when it appeared. No fire, no smoke, no fracture, just light. So soft, it almost felt like forgiveness. And yet, it too was hidden. Not because it harmed, but because it revealed too much. Found glowing in catacombs, buried under altars, and pulled from walls during times of silence. This is selenite, the angel's tear that couldn't be hidden. Rank 4. Selenite, the angel's tear, that couldn't be hidden. It was never carved and never polished, and yet when light touched it, it glowed from within, like something breathing just beneath the surface. Selenite, named after Selene, the ancient moon goddess, has been called many things: the mirror of purity, the veil between worlds, and in more than one forgotten language, the stone that watches back. It was kept in temples, buried under floors, and later removed entirely from sacred sites. Not because it was dangerous, but because it refused to stay hidden. Selenite is a crystalline form of gypsum, calcium sulfate dihydrate, usually forming in long, transparent blades or fibrous masses. Its structure is soft, only 2 on the Mohs hardness scale, but it breaks cleanly into sheets so smooth they once served as windows in Roman churches. Found in desert caves, salt plains, and deep underground chambers, selenite grows in silence. Its most famous specimens come from the Naka mine in Chihuahua, Mexico, where cathedral-sized crystals stretch over 30 feet long, buried in temperatures and humidity so extreme that humans can barely survive long enough to study them. Selenite is colorless to milky white, sometimes with a faint golden hue, and often exhibits a luminous quality even under dim light. But what made it sacred, what made it feared, was not its clarity, but its reaction to darkness. In several ancient Near Eastern and Mediterranean cultures, selenite was believed to be an anchor for light. It was said that if kept too long in a sealed room, it would begin to glow, not from reflection, but from memory. Early Coptic texts describe it as a fragment of the first dawn. In temples dedicated to lunar deities, from Babylon to Thebes, thin plates of selenite were embedded into altars and passageways. Some shrines were designed to funnel moonlight directly into selenite-lined chambers during equinoxes, causing the stone to shimmer like moving water. But as monotheistic systems rose, many of these sites were condemned. Priests described whispers during full moons, reflections that showed things not in the room, and moments when the stone seemed to pulse as if responding to thought. By the 5th century CE, several religious councils in North Africa and Byzantium banned the use of selenite in public temples and devotional spaces. In some cases, it was removed from sacred walls and replaced with marble or obsidian. One decree stated, "Let not the lightless stone reside where prayers are heard, for its memory is not of this world." Today, selenite is often sold as a cleansing crystal, used in meditation, energy work, or to charge other stones. Its commercial form is usually polished into towers, wands, or spheres, priced between $10 and $200, depending on size and clarity. But in some monastic communities in Ethiopia and Eastern Europe, selenite is still treated as a restricted material, not because of superstition, but because of belief that light, once stored, remembers everything it touched. Stories persist of selenite towers left on altars that flicker in pitch darkness, of sealed tombs where selenite plates, untouched for centuries, glowed faintly as archaeologists first opened them, of dreams remembered by the stone, long after the dreamer forgot. Selenite never begged for attention. It simply refused to dim, a crystal too pure for silence, too luminous to be hidden. But the next gem, it whispers not to the light, but to what waits in the dark. Selenite glowed too purely to be left in darkness, but not every sacred thing shines. Some speak, not loudly, not in words, but in tones only the still can hear. Tones that move between sleep and memory, between prayer and echo. The next stone was never feared for its weight, but for what it repeated: voices, dreams, names no one remembers saying. This is Celestite, the forbidden voice between worlds. Rank 3. Celestite, the forbidden voice between worlds. At first glance, it looks fragile, pale blue, almost translucent, a mineral that seems more sky than stone. But Celestite, whose name means of the heavens, has long been feared not for its beauty, but for its silence. In cultures across Mesopotamia, North Africa, and coastal Europe, it was known by another name, the stone that listens when no one else can. And for centuries, it was banned, not because it failed to serve the sacred, but because it served something else entirely. Celestite is a strontium sulfate mineral, strontium sulfate, most often forming in delicate sky blue crystals that cluster like frozen blossoms. It crystallizes in sedimentary rock, particularly in limestone and dolomite, and is often found in geodes that, once cracked open, reveal glimmering caverns of light. Significant deposits have been found in Madagascar, Sicily, Ohio, and the Sahara borderlands, often in regions once considered spiritually volatile. In ancient Phoenician and Berber cultures, Celestite geodes were placed in desert altars, not as offerings but as conduits for spiritual energy. Oral tradition held that during specific celestial alignments, the crystals could echo prayers into other realms or return with answers not meant for this world. A surviving Carthaginian scroll refers to Celestite as the breath catcher, used only by trained seers and always buried afterward. Why? Because once it had spoken, it would not fall silent again. In Hellenistic Egypt, Celestite was linked to the star Sirius. Temples near Alexandria recorded rituals in which celestite geodes were placed under chanting chambers, used to amplify the soul's vibration. But by the time of early Christian expansion, Celestite's use had all but vanished. Several early bishops in Cyrenaica issued warnings against sky-born minerals that shimmer without light, believing they created unnatural clarity of thought, disturbing prayer, and opening the mind to unseen voices. One monastic journal from 411 CE describes Celestite as a stone that invites the listener to places they were not meant to enter. In the Middle Ages, Celestite became tied to folk beliefs about spirit bridges, invisible connections between the mortal and the ethereal. In parts of Wales, Normandy, and the Balkans, people buried Celestite near crossroads or riverbanks, hoping to attract favorable messages. But more often they were warned, please do not leave it out in the moonlight. Do not sleep beside it. Do not speak aloud in its presence unless you are ready to be heard. Today, Celestite is appreciated for its aesthetic serenity. Polished clusters, spheres, and displayed geodes range from $30 to $500, with fine specimens from Madagascar fetching even higher prices. But some collectors keep it under a cloth. Some never place it in bedrooms. And specific remote communities still refuse to touch the Celestite freshly unearthed, believing it holds the last sound it heard, until it finds someone to release it. At the base of a collapsed temple in southern Tunisia, archaeologists uncovered a perfectly intact Celestite geode sealed in clay, wrapped in linen, surrounded by iron nails. A protective gesture, or a warning not to break it open. Celestite doesn't shine like Obsidian, burn like Cinnabar, or pulse like Moldavite. It waits, it listens, and sometimes it answers. A voice not of angels, not of demons, but of something older, something between. And if Celestite listens, the next stone speaks, through patterns, through shimmer, through 1,000 shifting reflections. A gem said to blur the lines between what's seen and what's watching. Celestite echoed across thresholds we couldn't name, but the next stone didn't speak. It reflected, not the sky, not the room, but you. Not the you that speaks, or smiles, or forgets, but the one behind your eyes. The part that rarely looks in mirrors, because it knows what's watching back isn't always supposed to be seen. This is Labradorite, the mirror that opens from the inside. Banko montoinoi funkoi to rank, hasang rank mot seraph. Rank 2. Labradorite, the dimensional key banned by ancient orders. It doesn't glow in the dark. It shimmers when you move, when you breathe, when you think. Labradorite doesn't reflect its surroundings. It reflects what's behind you, within you, and sometimes what isn't supposed to be there at all. A stone that's been feared not for what it is, but for what it reveals. Geologically, Labradorite is a feldspar mineral rich in calcium and sodium, characterized by an internal structure that produces a rare optical effect known as labradorescence, a play of spectral colors that shifts with the movement of light. Blues, greens, golds, purples, sometimes all at once, flash across its surface in what seems like a silent electric storm. The finest specimens originate from Labrador, Canada, Finland, Madagascar, and Russia, often buried deep within igneous rock formations formed by the cooling of magma. But across nearly every culture that encountered it, one theme remained constant. Labradorite was never just a stone. It was a mirror of something more. Among the Inuit of northern Canada, Labradorite was said to have fallen from the aurora borealis itself, caught in stone as the sky tried to speak to Earth. Shamans carried Labradorite to enter the dream world, speak with ancestors, or cross between realities. But it was never worn casually. The same legends warned, if the stone flashes when no light moves, you're not alone. In pre-Christian Scandinavia, Labradorite was placed in burial ships, not to guide the body, but to confuse spirits that tried to follow. Viking burial texts describe it as the veil made visible, used to obscure the sight of malevolent forces or conceal sacred paths that should never be walked upon twice. Over time, possession of Labradorite in certain villages became restricted. Stones were passed only through ritual or by elders. Children were not allowed to hold them until a certain age, not because of superstition, because of memory, of what had happened when someone looked too long and saw something looking back. In Eastern Europe, several monasteries during the 13th and 14th centuries banned the use of Labradorite in religious relics. One abbot described prayers disturbed by colors that moved where there was no light. Another warned, this stone pulls the gaze inward, but not all who go in return the same. In modern metaphysical circles, Labradorite is known as a stone of transformation, believed to awaken hidden intuition or thin the veil between dimensions. But spiritual advisors often include a caveat. Use with grounding, use with caution. Some individuals report intense dreams, distortions in time perception, or unexpected emotional flooding after prolonged use. Commercially, Labradorite is readily available, but prices vary significantly. Standard cabochons range from $10 to $50, while high-flash spectralite from Finland, stones that show deep blues, violets, and oranges, can exceed $500 per piece. Yet even seasoned collectors admit there are stones they've sold and stones they've locked away, not because they're cursed, but because they responded. In one case study from a Baltic archaeological dig, a Labradorite tablet was found wrapped in linen and buried beneath what appeared to be an unfinished chapel. The structure above it had no altar, no doorway, only a single inscription scratched into the floor. Let what lives in reflection stay in reflection. Labradorite, the mirror that doesn't show you your face, it shows you your threshold. And when the threshold opens, it doesn't always close behind you. But what if something wasn't meant to close? The next stone on this list wasn't discovered. It was left behind. A gem that shimmered with feathers no angel ever claimed, and was hidden, sealed, and feared. Not by empires, but by the very ones who claimed to protect us from darkness. Labradorite turned reflection into revelation. But there's one stone that doesn't reflect, or echo, or burn. It descends. Not as a question, not as a warning, but as a final line drawn between what was allowed and what was never meant to reach us. It doesn't shine, it hovers. And in its stillness, there is no invitation, only instruction. This is Seraphinite, the gem that carried the last command of heaven. Rank 1, Seraphinite, the gem that carried the last command of heaven. Some stones reflect the earth, others hold the sky. But Seraphinite, named after the highest order of angels, was said to carry something different. Not light, not energy, but a message. One never spoke aloud. One was never meant for human hands. Seraphinite is a rare variety of clinochlore, a member of the chlorite group of minerals, found almost exclusively in eastern Siberia, near the Lake Baikal region of Russia. Its color is deep forest green, streaked with silvery white chatoyant patterns that resemble feathers or wings, a natural formation caused by inclusions of mica. When polished, These feather-like shapes shimmer under light, shifting as the stone is moved, appearing almost to drift, as if in midair. The indigenous Buryat peoples referred to this stone as the sleeping feather, believing it fell from a celestial being during the creation of the lake itself. In local myths, only shamans were allowed to touch it, and only once in a lifetime, during rituals that required absolute silence. It was said that if the stone pulsed with light, the ritual could begin. If not, the ceremony must be abandoned forever. What Seraphinite connected to was never named. In early Orthodox Christian settlements, Seraphinite was found hidden inside old wooden icons, tucked behind paint and gold leaf. Some monasteries believed it had been brought by missionaries crossing the Siberian steppe, but its presence was never officially recorded. A 17th century Russian liturgical manual refers to a green stone of layered wings, said to sing when no mouth speaks. After that century, all mention of it vanished from official texts. Unlike Obsidian or Cinnabar, Seraphinite was never banned by royal decree or papal order. It was quietly removed. Icons containing it were repainted, altars rebuilt. One theory from a Vatican archival scholar suggests that Seraphinite was too close to the line, neither holy nor profane, but something in between, a remainder. Something not erased by the fall, but left as a final instruction. Today, Seraphinite is cut into beads, pendants, and cabochons. It's prized for its beauty and softness, just 2 to 2.5 on the Mohs scale, making it difficult to polish but ethereal when done right. Prices range from $30 to $500 depending on clarity and feather pattern. Yet some gem cutters refuse to work with high-grade Seraphinite alone. One craftsman in Novosibirsk once said, "There are stones that calm the hand. This one waits for it to tremble." In metaphysical circles, Seraphinite is often described as a healing stone for the heart chakra, associated with divine energy, renewal, and activation of the light body. But others tell subtler stories, of dreams that end in languages never learned, of rooms that seem brighter after the stone is removed, and of moments when, standing alone, someone turns around, convinced they heard a single breath behind them. A recent archaeological team working in a collapsed chapel near Irkutsk discovered a Seraphinite tile embedded beneath the altar, a location where no record indicated it should be. The slab was inscribed in Old Church Slavonic, 3 words weathered by centuries: "Do not answer back." Seraphinite isn't loud. It doesn't burn. It doesn't flash in the darkness. But it's the only gem on this list believed to carry a final command. Not from a king, not from a god, but from something that was once both and neither. And so it was sealed, hidden, not because of evil, but because not all light should be held for too long. Thank you for watching. If this list resonated with you, subscribe and let us delve deeper into forgotten stones. Because next time, we explore what happens when a gemstone is never buried, yet the tomb still forms around it. Not every gemstone is meant to be worn, and some were never meant to be found. If you've made it this far, thank you. Every like, every comment, and every new subscriber gives us the strength to keep uncovering what history tried to bury. But the story doesn't end here. Because while these 10 stones were banned for touching darkness, the next ones were used to feed it, in secret rituals, in silent wars, in the hands of those who didn't fear the dark. They served it. Subscribe now and be ready. The next chapter begins soon, the devil's favorite stones, and why they're still feared today.